I was gonna say you wanted to finally be the tallest guy on set.
He's not.
Thank you, Philly. Thanks for the laugh,
I'm
Philly.
the tallest guy on set.
Howdy, I'm Jared Padalecki, and I'd like to welcome you to Entertainment Weekly's Around the Table with the cast and executive producer, showrunner of Walker Independence.
My husband was killed.
Who killed him?
The new sheriff. I want you to help me kill him.
This is a risk I'm not willing to take.
Let's go ahead and start this off. Seamus, where...
Jared.
The fans want to know, where did this idea come from?
While working on Walker, I realized there was a little bit of an opportunity. It sounds cliche, but I always loved Westerns, and I always wanted to make a Western. The first script I ever wrote was a Western, so I was trying to figure out a way back, and I kind of realized there was a little bit of a cheat on Walker after I killed off a certain character who I was feeling remorse killing them off. And we kept saying things like fifth generation walkers. So it felt like an opportunity to like, what was the first generation walker? And honestly, doing the math was like, wait a second, that's the starting point of like, who were the first generation walkers and how to bring back this character who I loved and how to get away with doing a bunch of stuff that I always wanted to do and tackling a genre that I love. So it was that was it. That was, what lit the stick of dynamite.
For sure. I think for me, I kind of recall it was before the first episode of Walker even aired, and credit to Anna Fricke, who's running Walker and has since day one. The vibe in the Walker family and the Walker verse is very creatively inviting. And so it's kind of like best idea wins. There are no egos. And so Seamus came and was like, hey, I'm tired of writing for the show. I know it hasn't aired yet, but I want to write a Western. Can I do it or not?
Yeah, you get the boys down.
All right.
That is exactly what you sound like, actually. That's wild.
Yeah. Now, this is for our actors. What made each of you want to be involved in this project? I'll start with K-Mac.
It's actually interesting. As all of you know, we get asked the question all the time, what's your dream project? What's something you'd love to do? And my pat answer was always, put me in a corset and hoop skirt and I'm a happy girl. I'd love to do a period piece. And I guess manifestation is a thing because here I am. But, aside from that, initially reading the script, there's such a nostalgia to Westerns. And Seamus, you did such a great job of capturing that. But also there's another layer to the show. I keep saying it's not your mama's Western, and it really isn't, because each one of these characters has so much depth to the world. And we really are getting a chance to kind of reinvent this genre. But particularly with Abby, she's not your typical woman in the West. She has so much more agency than a lot of women in the 1870s. Unfortunately, given that her entire life goes up in flames in the first 15 minutes of the show. But it's in the trailer, Seamus.
It is the trailer, Seamus.
Yeah. But rather than, succumbing to a victim, she chooses her own destiny and moves forward and finds all of these lovely folks. Or they find her. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, not your mama, not my mama's Western, my great grandmama's Western. Because Philly is the next person I see on this little kind of crazy chart. I'm going to you next.
So for me, I just really loved what Seamus and in particularly Larry were preaching about the show, which was that it was going to be different. It was going to be inclusive. It wasn't going to be just about particular people. It was going to be about everybody. And especially coming from a Western sense, from a minority standpoint, being Black in that time of the 1800s, that story hasn't really been told. And now we are actually, and I thank God for Seamus, Larry, and even you, I'm actually being able to rewrite a little bit of history. Also, my dad, I grew up watching Bonanza, and, it was just one of those things. So technically, it's kind of like an homage to my dad as well. So for me, it hits a whole bunch of different points.
We all love Billy's dad.
We do.
Thank you, Philly and Philly's dad. Going back down, I'm looking at Katie. All right, K-Fang.
The conversations that I was allowed to have really early in this process with Seamus, with Larry Tang, who's not here, but would make it a lot more boisterous no matter what time of day. We'd be bleeping out every other word, but he'd be right. And with Anna, I can honestly say that it is one of the most tender, attentive, expansive, respectful show joining processes I've ever been part of. I have never had any group of people go so far out of their way to let me know such a huge part of this show is the inclusivity of a time that we're losing the sense of because of how we portray it in media. Because the truth is that the West was hugely diverse. It was this, threshold of so many different cultures coming together for survival too, because they're out in the middle of goddamn nowhere.
Amen. Thank you, Katie.
Sorry for swearing.
No, it's I don't make the rules either. Let's go to Matt, Justin. Whichever one of you fine gentlemen want to answer first. It doesn't have to be Matt, Justin. It can be Justin, Matt.
For me, personally, I was really nervous. I had a lot of reservations about doing a period piece about playing a native at this time because we've seen it so many times. It's kind of always been the same. And I grew up, I tell people, I grew up watching Westerns, wanting to be the cowboy because they had so much fun. And I never really wanted to be the Indian in these movies. And so I was worried that was kind of going to be the case. My wife would tell you I was kind of like pacing the house going, I don't know how I feel about this. One minute I'm like, I'm into it. And the next minute I'm like, no, I'm not into it. I don't like this idea. But to speak to what Philly and Katie said, it was after the conversations with Seamus and Larry and producers, and I felt safe. I felt like you guys were going to have integrity in telling this story. You're going to give us an opportunity to do something new here. And that got me excited. And that pushed me over that threshold that I needed to get past too.
It all started for me. I remember when I was lucky enough to come jump on Walker with you, and our first scene was when Hoyt attacks Cordy, there at the house. And I remember that day just from thinking how much fun I was having. Like, it was just everything I loved about being an actor was encompassed in that scene, playing with you and the whole cast. And over the next few months, on and off, getting to play Hoyt, it was just, I felt like I kind of met my spirit animal in a way. And Seamus Seamus and Anna had just the perfect voice for that guy. And I felt like I heard it really well. So you were there, it was just, we were just loving what we were doing.
How do you feel this version of Hoyt is different than the one that was on Walker?
Well, they're both equally charming and incredibly handsome. I know that. So, but
my bad. There you go.
I would like to say that the modern day Hoyt was, to me, he was all talking away. I see him as somewhat harmless, and this version of Hoyt, I see more as a man of action.
I was going to say you wanted to finally be the tallest guy on set.
He's not.
Thank you, Philly.
True.
Thanks for the laugh,
I'm
Philly.
the tallest guy on set. Obviously.
People here, they're all running from something. Trying to find themselves. I guess that's why they call it independence.
Pardon me, Your Highness.
Now that we've kind of talked to the cast about what drew y'all to the role, I want to ask Seamus, this is for both of us, but I'll start with you. Which role do you remember being the most difficult to cast?
Everyone was pick number one, which was incredible. Better than me.
Unheard of.
Incredible. But it was definitely Abby Walker. I mean, there's no doubt.
Thank God.
I don't know where you were at the beginning, Catherine, because it took.
Well, that's the
felt
thing.
like
that's what I remember. Is that we obviously knew who she was and is, but for some reason I think we were led to believe that she was signed on to something else or unavailable, and so we watched dozens of videos, and they're all 5-10 minutes apiece, and they're all wonderful, talented young actresses, kind and hardworking and beautiful. And so we're going through those, and there were great options. And then it seems like we had an email or a phone call one day. They were like, hey, by the way, Kat Mack is available. We're like, what? Well, all right, send her the script, And so Kat and Matt, what was the read like when y'all did the chemistry read? via Zoom from different places.
So that was a surprise to me. I was there. I was told it was just a director's session. So, I'd done some things with Larry and worked through the scenes. And Larry Tang is such a wonderful director in auditions because he allows you the space and the amount of times to go through the scene to try everything. And he'll give you notes every time. Some of them are completely out of left field. Some of them, just add another layer to what you're doing already. And it's really fun as an actor. It's what I've missed about auditioning is getting to kind of play with the director in the room and experiment with the material. But then all of a sudden he goes, hey, we're going to have you come back in like 30 minutes and read with Matt Barr. And I'm going, okay, yeah, sure. Zoom chemistry read. Let's see how this goes. Let's keep doing this. My first thought was, oh man, I could work with this guy for years. This is awesome. This family is so wonderful. And these people are creative and passionate and kind and fun. And this is a place I want to be. This is a home I want to create. And so thank you for having me.
What sort of a man drinks during the day?
Oh, the kind that doesn't care what royalty thinks of me.
Or the kind with something to hide?
We've talked about some good stuff. I want to ask each of y'all a question. What is your most and least favorite part of making a period piece?
The clothes sometimes, because Santa Fe is very hot and then it can get very rainy and then it can get very windy. We don't have it as bad as the girls do. We don't. We're not in corsets.
No, you don't.
Or heavy dresses.
No question, 10 out of 10, the clothes. They are beautiful. Marion Toy should get every award that has ever existed for a smart person who puts good clothes on people. I am not a person who functions well when I cannot breathe. And now I am in a corset, a bustle, bloomers, 2 layers of skirts, because that's the other thing about my character is that I am the de facto fashion plate on the show. So everything that you look on a mannequin and you go, man, that's fantastic, I want to put that on. I spend all day in that. So in the morning, I'm like, God, this is great. I'm the best actor ever. And then 3 hours in, everybody just watches me melt into a non-functioning pile of, I'm like a clothing cake.
You're going to love the three-parter where it's Kate Carver has a hard winter, because that's coming up and more layers.
That sounds like my autobiography. Kate Carver has a hard winter. That's my millennial.
Amos, I thought you were writing an episode where she runs the first marathon, but in her period clothing.
For me, it's like, it's kind of fun to when you're shooting something to improvise and kind of, BS something. And when you're doing period, you can't, you got to think through what would be appropriate for that period. Yeah. So I want to say man, that's awesome. And you can't say awesome.
Can I go with favorite? Least favorite, I guess least favorite would have to come down to some of the clothes stuff. But favorite thing, like yesterday on set, was riding horses all day. It's the best.
That is.
I'm like constantly pitching Seamus like, hey, when can we do this? Hey, when can we do this on a horse? I'm like, when do I get to jump off a roof on a horse? Like,
there you go.
We'll get there.
That's true. We spend a lot of time being like, Justin, no.
I love how immersive our set is and how committed everyone has been, from Seamus and Larry to everyone in the cast to the period. It's so a lot of times in television you have to cut corners for time and for anything, but this entire set, we have a whole Western town that's just ours, and it's a couple of blocks that all of the sets, interior and exterior, are practical, so we can walk down the street and in somewhere and out the other place. Matt and I did a horse chase through town in the pilot. Gosh, if I had to come up with a least favorite part, potentially the amount of dust that gets in places where dust should not be ever.
Mm-hmm.
But we've learned to deal with that. The pilot we were learning, and now we've got the dust. We've got dust management under control.
People aren't what they seem. You're the new sheriff?
Is something rattling you? You seem awfully on edge.
Westerns are making a big resurgence right now. And do any of y'all have an opinion on why that is, what the appeal of a Western is in our modern times?
I think there's a nostalgia to Westerns. People love seeing that kind of community, and there's a survival, and there's a sort of adventure aspect to Westerns. There's a romanticism to them that it's familiar to so many folks. But in Walker Independence, we have that. but there's more. There's more to the party.
I've always thought like westerns are like a simplified sandbox of our culture. You know, we become a lot more sophisticated nowadays, but it's like we're fighting and dying for the same things now than we were, 200 years ago. So in uber political times that we live in, there's something really satisfying, and I'm always afraid to say this at times, but like it just took care of. It's like Texas justice. Not saying it's right, but there's just something kind of wickedly fulfilling about that. People took action and they did it right in the streets. And so I always thought that's kind of just vicariously, we live through that in a way with Westerns.
I think that, like, off of that, I think the stakes are higher just dramatically sometimes. I think Westerns kind of plateaued, and there was a decline of Western as a genre, like in film and obviously TV, there's little to nothing. And I think I think there was a realization, there's a chance to revisit this through a different lens. Mm-hmm. And what if we start telling Westerns where it has the same appeal of everything we're talking about, but from different points of view and from the margins of history. And you can do a Western in a way that we all love, but what's the new take? I think it took a while for everyone to wrap their head around. Time for a new take. And there's still that wish fulfillment that, Matt's talking about, but also like come at it totally differently. And I don't, that's what was appealing to me, not only as a writer, but as like someone who loves to read Westerns, to watch movies, to watch films, so.
That's a great segue to my question back to you, boss man. Was there any additional research you did either on factual Texas history or watching more Western movies, or was this something that you knew about already?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of everything. It was just like a chance to kind of go back and revisit an era and look for those untold stories, look for, actual true to life characters who never had their day in the sun. And also like rewatching like all my favorite movies and just look for what's the new take, what's the remix. We say remix a lot, and I'm obsessed with turning points in not only like characters, like here's where we meet this character, they're about to make a big mistake or the best choice in their life. And I think kind of, Matt said 1871. I don't like to specifically say the year. So right around this time, where it was a massive turning point in not only nation's history, but Texas history. And so it became something where if you could have all these characters about to make, these certain choices that made them all collide at the same time, while you're kind of reinventing what Texas was at this time. It just seemed like a nice collision course that laid kind of the setting. And you could kind of build upon.
Well, and to your credit, Seamus, so great about what you're doing with this is you don't shy away from the hard things, the gritty things, or the dark things, or the putting characters in that gray area. And I think that's because that's real and that's life and that's the West. No one escapes unscathed, I guess.
Yeah, no, and agreeing. And I hope I'm not intruding in this at all, but I do want to piggyback off of Kat with you, Seamus, because in particular, when me and you were having our conversations, me and you were pretty much on the same page. We didn't want to shy away from certain things. The 1800s, there was racism, there was prejudice. And I really wanted to touch on that. And kind of going back a little bit, I didn't know before I talked to Seamus about Bass Reeves. I didn't know that he was one of the most noble Black cowboys of the generation. I did not know that. And, it just goes to show, again, Seamus, you, Anna, you're all touching on something that is a remix now, and we just get to show it. And it just makes me super, super, super excited. But yeah, it's just an homage to all of you, seriously.
Darling, I've been waiting for you.
How are you feeling?
Naked. My husband, he was supposed to be the sheriff of Independence. Do you know where that is?
I'll take you there.
Often in Westerns, women are these damsels in distress that need a big, strong, capable man to come and save them. However, it's not the case in Walker Independence. So, why was it important to play such strong characters in this setting?
Wow. Well, I think that gender roles in the West, one of the best kept secrets, not kept secrets, is that gender roles in the West and on the frontier were not as cut and dry as people think they were. There were queer people in the West. There were trans people in the West. There were all kinds of social and romantic partnerships. It was just a big, endless frontier world of people figuring each other out in the midst of racism, sexism, homophobia. But there is also sort of an odd freedom to exploring that because it was the frontier. People were dealing with things they'd never dealt before, dealing with really harsh conditions and existential crises. Everybody was so far apart. No one knew what anyone else was doing. So one of the things I love the most about this show is that there is room for exploration of gender role and queerness. I'm queer. I identify as a femme person and not as a woman. So I think that playing somebody who is so high femme and also so in control of their space in many ways, and then not in control of their space in many ways, means a lot to me.
I'll follow what Katie was saying on that, and that not only is having Katie Findlay a gift, but it's interesting because you have these two women who have extremely different backgrounds, extremely different personalities in the way that they navigate this world. But as soon as they meet, it's almost that game recognizes game. They clock each other instantly and go, oh, wait a minute, you're like me. You're not the typical, you don't fit the mold. You don't fit this world or what this world expects of you. And yet, having navigated it in different ways, they have such a great friendship and, in some ways a partnership in certain aspects of the show because they see that in each other and they recognize that in each other and they challenge each other in different ways. And there's almost an unspoken humor and understanding between these two women of this world and how what their role is in it. But, for Abby in particular, it's, and for me, getting to play someone like Abby, it's, as Katie said, it's an honor and it's a privilege and it's a responsibility that I take very seriously because, she is a woman who has not only everything else women have to deal with, but also the obstacle of society. And being a woman who doesn't fit can present its own challenges and its own struggles, but also having the opportunity to kind of subvert the ingenue in a way is a lot of fun. And to go, okay, she looks like a lady on the outside, but is she? Is she in every way? Does she always make the right choice? Yes, she's a tenant of justice and of doing the right thing and caring about other people, but what is the West going to do to Abby and how does it change her?
I love watching it too. Because Big Boss Man is here and I'm technically an EP, I'm going to try and behave in front of him and say, Katie Finley, we need you to go make this TV show. So
I gotta go to work.
Bye, Katie.
What's funny, I'm looking at my car right now. I've been watching this poor, lovely man who can now see me and I think is waving at me. I gotta go get in his vehicle because he's been really patient.
Thank you so much.
I love you guys. Thanks for having me.
I got big plans for this place. No one knows who he really is. Snakes shed their skin eventually.
Okay, this question is for Justin. How important was authenticity to you in accepting this role and taking it on and helping to tell the story of the Native culture?
That's not a hard question at all. No, it was extremely important to me. I always felt a huge responsibility. And like I said, I wrestled with the idea of playing this character, a Native character, at this point in history, because it's not cut and dry. It's not simple. Their world was changing drastically. And I don't think I've ever experienced something that made my whole life change the way that they were probably experiencing at the time. So I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to tell a truthful story. I wanted to do it in a way that really respected, especially the Apache culture. And Seamus and I were on the same page with that. And at one point, I felt very overwhelmed. I was in the hotel room during the pilot, and I almost felt like I was going to have like a panic attack because it just dawned on me how much weight was on getting this right. I didn't want to let anybody down. And there's always going to be critics. There's always going to be people who are going to point out things. And like Seamus said, we're not always going to get it 100% right, from idea to the script to the day. We're going to be trying our best. And to get the blessing of the translator, and after meeting him and for him to accept me and to allow me to speak his language and to tell this story, it felt amazing, and that's always there when I'm in a scene, whether I'm speaking the language or not. I'm trying to really honor that. So it's been beautiful, man. It's been great. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I definitely do feel the responsibility heavy. I hope I'm doing them justice.
It's an amazing job.
You are.
Okay. I have heard something that makes me both happy for y'all and insanely jealous of y'all. I heard of something called Cowboy Camp.
Yeah.
Who got to be a part of Cowboy Camp?
We all did. All of us here. Yeah.
Come on. I'm jealous now. All right. What was that like? Who was the MVP? And what were the toughest skills to learn?
Oh, man. I think the MVP are the horses, honestly. For us. I rode horses in Girl Scouts a little bit, but I've learned so much even in the short amount of time we've been here. But it's a lot of fun just to get a horse and get to know them and start to build that relationship and be out with the gang. We have such a good time out on our ranch just riding around. What do you say, fellas?
I admire you. Remember one of our first cowboy camps, they're like, hey, Kat, get on the back of Matt's horse and just hold on. On the saddle? No, you're not on the saddle. You're on the horse's butt. Just hold on, Matt. Let her loose. Like, all right, here we go.
I had to learn to ride backwards. We didn't end up using it in the pilot, but I was on Matt's horse backwards at one point.
I mean, we'll use it. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I find the hardest thing for me is a trot. That is hard. It's hard on the glutes and it's hard on the inner leg. Okay.
Everyone looks great on a horse. Philly, you look amazing on a horse, man. I've seen some of this.
Justin is being modest. Sorry to interrupt. He's a natural. It's incredible.
I love it, man. It's so much fun. We all have a lot to learn, but it's just so much fun doing it. Like Kat said, we're riding out together. You can't see people, you can't see cars, you can't see anything for miles.
You are, though. I've ridden a lot with Justin, and I'll just be watching him, looking at him like, man, you are right where you're supposed to be.
You asked me if I was staying here for revenge or something else. Maybe it's justice, one way or another.
One last question to wrap this up. Let's hear it from our captain. This is a simple question, should be a one-word answer. What ultimately is this story about?
What ultimately is this story about?
What ultimately is this story about?
Identity. I think it's about two things and 1,000 things all at once. But I mean, everything I think I've written on, everything I'm drawn to essentially is about identity of just, Westerns I think are defined by changing world, changing landscape. How are people going to adapt? It really is kind of the defining thing. So, I love, like I talked about earlier, finding moments in history, finding moments in people's lives that were turning points and what helped shape and define them. And so there's nothing better than a Western and kind of picking a bunch of characters that what would be the most interesting person to put at this certain place in time. And then part and parcel of that is just change of seeing how people, like we've all talked about, how they made it, how they felt, how to love out here, how they learned to ride a horse for the first time. How do they learn to ride together, someone back to back on a horse, and just how people change, whether it's in the face of tragedy or in the face of kind of love. I think those are the two kind of defining things. And, I learned a lesson on Battlestar Galactica was my first show, and there's a lot of things that I like to kind of carry forward. And one of the mantras on that show is people doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. And I think about that literally every day when I'm in the room looking at a blank page, having conversations with the actors, the producing team. The one word answer would be identity, Jared, and then the 190 word answer would be the rest of that. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Seamus. Thank you, gang. Love y'all. Miss y'all. Keep kicking some butt out there. Right on. Thank y'all for watching Entertainment Weekly's Around the Table with Walker Independence. Can't wait for you to watch Walker Independence premiering October 6th.